Hello, this is Mr. Sindel, and Riley is sick today. So today is Thursday, October 25th, and here is the warm-up that you need to be doing on a whiteboard. So I'll pause here for a second so you can pause the video, and I'm going to go on to the notes right after this. Alright, you've unpaused the video, and I realize that I need to actually talk about the warm-up to make sure that we know what's going on. So, when I'm solving both sides for C, if I come over here to my brush tool, I have this 16.5, so I'm going to get all my numbers on this side by subtracting 13.5 from both sides minus 13.5 from both sides. And when I do that, I still have my 5c. 16.5 minus 13.5 is just 3, so I have a plus 3, copy down my equal sign underneath. 13.5, 13.5 cancel each other out, and I'm just left with a positive 10c. From here, I'm going to subtract 5c, subtract 5c, and on this side, I'm just left with a 3, and on this side, I'm left with a 5c. So I'm really close. I'm going to recopy this line up here. 3 is equal to 5c. I'm going to divide both sides by 5, so divide by 5. And 5's cancel out, and I'm left with c is equal to 3/5. There is my answer. And if I want to keep that as a decimal, 3/5 is the same thing as 0.6. So either of those would have been correct. All right, solving for n for the second side. On this side, I'm going to add 1/2 n to both sides, plus 1/2 n plus 1/2 n. I know that I'm putting the n's on this side because I'll have the n's positive. It will mean that when I subtract 16 over here, it'll have a negative answer, but that way at least I don't have to divide by a negative. It's just really preference. So when I add 3.5, I can just say 3.5, or I can keep it as an improper fraction. So 3 over 1 plus 1 over 2. That's the problem that I'm essentially doing right here. That's the same thing as if I multiply the top and bottom here by 2 over 2, which now becomes 6 over 2 plus my original 1/2. With like denominators, I can add those and I can get 7/2. So 3n plus 1/2 n is 7/2 n plus 16. And that's equal to, well, these cancel out, and I still have this 2. I'm going to subtract 16 on both sides, minus 16, and I'm left with 7/2 n is equal to -8, or -14, sorry. And now I need to get rid of this 7/2. So there are two ways of doing this one. Maybe the harder way of doing it is dividing both sides by 7/2. Another way of doing this, and I guess I'm running out of room here, so let me move, I guess I'll try to just copy it down up here. So this is my new line. -14 is equal to 7/2 n. I think the easiest way to do this problem is to divide by 7, because 7 is being multiplied by n, and n is being divided by 2, so I could multiply both sides by 2. So I'm going to do it in 2 steps here. First, I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. I'm going to say this side times 2, this side times 2, and by doing that, I'm canceling out that 2 and that 2. So 2 times 14, 2 times -14 rather, is going to be a -28. And I've canceled out the 2 on the right-hand side, so it's equal to 7n. And now I can divide both sides by 7. So I'm going to divide both sides by 7, divide both sides by 7. When I do that, the 7's cancel out, and I'm just left with n. And on the left-hand side, -28 divided by 7. Well, I know 28 divided by 7 is 4. And then a negative divided by a positive is a negative. So n is equal to 4, final answer. And I guess I should have I did box my final answer over here. Alright, so that was the warm-up. Make sure that you have the notes out in front of you. They look like this. Let's get rid of that. Alright, so you have the notes out in front of you. Here's how to do the notes. The notes are going to be a little bit short today. I think we have 2 examples, nothing on the back today. Equations with parentheses. So we have one additional step that needs to be permanent for today's problem set, and that's just the first thing that you do. We kind of talked about this yesterday in notes 2-6. The first thing you should do when solving equations is to simplify. Simplify I should say both expressions. And when I say both, I mean the expression on the left and the expression on the right. So if you have parentheses, you might need to distribute. And I'll just make that note here, distribute. There are cases where you don't need to distribute, and we saw some of those the other day also. Yesterday we saw this example. This is optional. You don't need to write this down. When we had something like 3 times this quantity of x minus 1, and that was equal to 9. In this case, you didn't need to simplify this expression. You didn't need to distribute, although some people chose to distribute. If you chose to not distribute, you could just immediately divide both sides by 3, like that, to get rid of the 3. In the cases for today, there's going to be very few examples, maybe like 5% of the examples that you'll be able to do this for. Most of the examples, you have to distribute that 3 to solve, because this side isn't divisible by 3. So I'm going to leave that here, but that was optional. Let's see an example. We have 2 examples. Here's the first example. So with that first step to simplify both expressions, I'm going to check the left side and the right side to see if they can be simplified. The right side, 4p plus 1, I can't really simplify that. That's as simplified as I can get. There's nothing more I can do. But on the other hand, on the left side, we can simplify that expression. We can simplify that by distributing that 4 and then combining like terms. So there are 2 things that I can do. So first, I'm going to distribute that 4 here and here. So I want you to try to do that before I go ahead. So go ahead and pause the video now. See if you can do that, and then check your work by unpausing the video. All right, so you've unpaused the video now. 4 times 5, that's 20. 4 times negative p is negative 4p, and I have to copy down this negative 3, copy down the equal sign, copy down the 4p, copy down the plus 1. So that's the step after I distribute. But I can also combine like terms, and you can see combining 2 terms on the left-hand side. Which 2 terms are they? Yeah, you're right. It's the 20 and the negative 3. When I combine those terms, I get 17, and I'm still left with the rest of the equation of minus 4p is equal to 4p plus 1. All right, so I've simplified this as much as possible. Now I'm going to solve for the variable. I'm going to solve for p, get it by itself. I'm going to get all the p's on one side, all the numbers on the other. So I'm going to decide to put all the p's on this side. The reason I'm doing that is because I know that if I add 4p to both sides and bring the p over here, it's going to be a positive. I like keeping my variables positive, but it's not necessarily. You don't have to do it. It's not necessary, I'm trying to say. You could have a negative 8p over here. So here I go. I'm going to add 4p on both sides. Add 4p. When I do that, what happens? When I do that, my 4p's are going to cancel out, and I'm going to be left with 17 on the left-hand side. Copy down this equal sign, just keep it right underneath, so it's a nice little column here. 4p plus 4p is 8p, and then I need to keep my plus 1. Plus 1. All right, I'm really close. What am I going to do now? To solve, you should be thinking about the step before I tell you what is the next step. And if you're shouting at the computer monitor, subtract 1 from both sides, you are correct. Subtract 1 from both sides. And 17 minus 1 is going to be 16. Copy down that equal sign right underneath all the other equal signs. Minus 1 and plus 1, those cancel each other out, and I'm left with 8p. I'm really, really close to finishing. What's my final step? You should be answering this before I do. My final step is to what? Yeah, you're right. Divide both sides by 8. Divide both sides by 8. And when I do that, I'll have my 8's cancel out. 16 divided by 8 is 2. Therefore, 2 is equal to my p, and I'm going to box my final answer. And I can check that work too. I'm running out of time for the notes, and I don't want to keep these notes too long. But if I plug p back into both 2 to p to both sides here, I should get the left side equal to the right side, the same number equal to the same number. That's how you can check your work. All right, our second and final example. We have multiple parentheses. Oh gosh, this looks scary. Here we go. So I need to simplify both sides of the equal sign. I need to simplify both expressions as I said up here. So when I simplify both sides, I need to just distribute. This is confusing. There's, I think, 1 or 2 problems on our problem set tonight where we might have this negative, just a random negative in front. A negative is the same thing as a negative 1. So if that's scary, think of this as a negative 1, and I'm going to distribute that negative 1 in each of those. So this negative 1 is going to be multiplied by 4. That negative 1 is going to be multiplied by 2c. That's going to be the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, I'm going to distribute that 6 with the negative 3c and distribute that 6 with the 2. So I want you to pause the video and go ahead and write this down right now. What happens when I distribute both sides, and can I simplify any farther? All right, you've unpaused the video now. So negative 1 times 4 is a negative 4, and negative 1 times 2c is a negative 2c. Copy down the equal sign directly underneath. 6 times a negative 3c is a negative 18c. A 6 times 2 is a positive 12. And can I simplify this any further? The answer is no, because the left side, that's an expression that is fully simplified. The right side is an expression that is completely simplified. All right, which side do I want to keep my c's on? Which side should my variables stay on? I'm going to choose the left side because I see if I add 18 to both sides, 18c rather, to both sides, then I will have a positive variable. And I prefer positive variables. It's just a preference that I have. But you might have chosen to put the c's on the right-hand side, which is completely valid. So I'm going to add 18 to both sides, plus 18c to both sides, plus 18c, and let's see what happens. When I add 18c to both sides, the 18c's over on the right-hand side are going to cancel out. I'm going to copy down this equal sign right underneath just to begin. I'm left with just a 12. There's that same 12, nothing happens there. I have this negative 4 still, nothing happened there. And now I have an 18 minus 2, or a negative 2 plus 18, which is the same thing as a positive 16c. All right, what's the next step? Tell me. Think in your mind, think at the computer. The computer is listening and it hears you saying add 4 to both sides. You are correct. So add 4 to both sides. When I do that, I will get these 4's to cancel out, and I'm just left with a positive 16c on the left, and adding 4 to both sides, 12 plus 4 is going to be 16. So I'm just going to write that. I could write it here. I'm just going to write it a little bit to the left, 16. Ooh, now we're really close to solving this. What is my final step to solve for c? How do I get c by itself? And you should be thinking in your mind, divide both sides by 16, because 16 is being multiplied by c. The opposite, or the inverse operation of multiply is divide. So I'm going to divide by 16, divide by 16. And when I do that, these 16s will cancel out. I will be left with c is equal to 16 divided by 16. Anything divided by itself is always 1. There's our final answer. All right, if you have any questions about this, you can feel free to text me via remind or ask the substitute. But those are 2 examples of the things that you might be seeing on your problem set tonight. Tonight we have 2 homework assignments. Let's go and take a look at that. So our 2 homework assignments, equations with parentheses and equations with parentheses with decimals and fractions, so the harder, slightly challenging version of that. And then be aware that tomorrow we do have our quiz. So be ready for that, and that quiz is just going to be on everything right here. So 2-step equations, word problems, which were really hard. Our scores were a little bit low for that one. Equations with variables on both sides, and today's lesson, equations with parentheses. And I think I did forget to mention on our warm-up that the binder check is going to be tomorrow. So make sure that your binder is perfect, because I'm just going to immediately check that the first thing tomorrow. All right, that concludes the notes for Algebra 1. Make sure that you write your summary on the very back. Maybe something about make sure to simplify both sides of the expression as the first step. And I will see you guys tomorrow.